Okay, when should you run your last long run before your marathon? How far should you go and how fast should you go? You've put all this energy into your training and this final bit can really let you down. But we don't need to guess what to do in the final weeks before a marathon. The best coaches in the world have already figured it out for us. But here's the thing, most amateur runners still get it wrong. They run too far, too fast, too close to race day, or worse, they back off too early and lose the sharpness and therefore they mistime their peak. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly what the world's most renowned coaches recommend for your last 2 long runs before race day. And then I'll show you my slight adjustment, a proven method that worked for me and also works for the majority of the runners that I coach. We've put all that effort and energy into our training. Now let's not let it slip. Let's get it right so we can arrive to start line sharp, confident and ready to go. I'm Lee Grantham, a coach and professional ultra runner who went from running a marathon in 4 hours and 25 minutes to running a marathon in 2 hours and 21 minutes. And I messed these final couple of long runs up for far too long and I would do them too close to the race, too fast and often too far. But when I finally fixed this, my race times got way faster. And if you're looking to run way faster, make big percentage gains on where you're currently at, then please get in contact by booking a call in the description. Now, I think part of the reason that people get this wrong and they mistime it is because there's just so much information out there and there's a lot of different opinions as to the best possible approach. And that's actually the way it should be because everybody is different and what works for you might not work for another person. But let's look at what some of the world's most renowned coaches advise, and then we can see how that affects you. So if we look at Renato Canova, he recommends 3 to 4 weeks out, a long specific block at marathon pace. So for example, the run could look like 35 to 38 kilometers, including 20 to 25 kilometers at marathon pace. And the purpose there is to develop efficiency and resistance at race pace under fatigue. He often uses progression runs, finishing strong, because he's helping his athletes not just negative split. They're not interested in that. They're going to negative split, but they're looking to win races. If we look at Jack Daniels, 3 weeks out, his final run is 16 to 20 miles or 26 to 33K. And that's mostly easy to moderate pace with a short marathon block of 6 to 8 miles. And the purpose there, still 3 weeks out, but it's different. It's maintaining aerobic fitness while reducing stress and recovery time. If we look at Pfitzinger, 2 to 3 weeks out, 3 weeks out, he'd do a long run, 12 miles at marathon pace, so 20 to 22 mile long run with 12 miles at marathon pace. And then 2 weeks out, he'd do a shorter run, 12 to 14 miles with 8 miles at marathon pace. And the focus there for his run is on race simulation, gear, nutrition testing, and pacing control. We've already done that weeks before, months before, and we're ready. If we look at Alberto Salazar, so he worked with Mo Farah and Galen Rupp, 2 weeks out, so it keeps that mileage high later into the taper for elite athletes. And that's the key point, and I'll come on to that in a second. 2 weeks out, he's doing a 20 to 21 mile long run, including 10 to 12 miles at marathon pace. And the focus there is on maintaining sharpness with intensity rather than cutting the volume too early. And if we look at Scott Douglas and Scott Rowe advanced marathoning with Pete Pfitzinger, 2 weeks out, he's after a controlled 13 to 16 mile run with 6 to 8 miles at marathon pace. So the emphasis, similar to Jack Daniels, arriving fresh, mentally ready, super important, using shorter, sharp sessions. But here's the thing, and this is really important, and I only truly understood this when I went full-time as an athlete. If we look at, for example, Canova's approach or Salazar's approach, they're set up for elite athletes. And the difference between an elite athlete, the main difference between an elite athlete and you is not just that they are quicker. It's that the job of an elite athlete is 80% recovery. And so imagine you've got Mo Farah under Salazar and he's able to do big long run, big portion at marathon pace, 2-3 weeks before. His job is only to recover. The children are taken care of at this point. His sole focus is to get ready to race. How does that compare when you've got a full-time job to go to? You've got to be there 35, 40 hours a week. You've got a family young children, partly your responsibility. You got personal commitments, you got flights to take, business trips. Are you going to be able to do 21 miles 2 weeks before with 12 miles at marathon pace and still arrive on the start line mentally and physically ready to go? And I'm not just talking about time. I'm not just talking about rest and sleep. I'm talking about recovery methods. And that would even separate that type of athlete from me as a full-time athlete, professional athlete. And so what I figured out was this, and this was through trial and error, but it really worked for me. The sole focus is to keep that fitness, to sharpen the pace, get mentally ready, but reduce that accumulated fatigue. And it's really important to remind yourself at this stage that the vast majority of the hard work is already done. And if we can just get to start line, ready to race, and pace what we're trying to achieve, then we're setting ourselves up for success. And that's exactly how these 2 runs are designed. So here's how I recommend structuring your final 2 long runs. When, how far, how fast. So all we're gonna do 3 weeks out, total distance, 25 kilometers. I used to do this a lot and I love this run. 15.5 miles. And the marathon pace block is 10 miles or 16 kilometers at marathon pace. So the structure for me looks something very simple like 5K easy, but gradually accelerating in the 4th and 5th kilometers, up to 16 kilometers segment at marathon pace or 10 miles. And then on the back, 4 kilometers, gradually bringing the heart rate and effort and pace down, and then easy. And the purpose there is to stress the body, to keep it sharp, but without giving it that lingering fatigue that is going to be there on race day. It's like a dress rehearsal for pacing, fueling, and for the mindset. We want to keep the body remembering what race pace, remembering what marathon feels like, without giving it that fatigue that is still going to be there on the start line. And then 2 weeks out, I do 21K, half marathon, 13.1 miles, with a marathon block of 6 miles. So 10K or 6 miles at marathon pace. And the structure there, very similar to the previous week. 5 kilometers easy, in that 4th and 5th kilometer, gradually accelerating, increasing the effort, then 10 kilometers or 6 miles at marathon pace, and then 5 or 6 kilometers on the end, gradually bringing the effort and pace down, and then easy kilometers. So what we're doing there is we're maintaining race-specific neuromuscular connections and that confidence without any risk of overreaching. Now those are 2 great runs. They're tried, they're tested, they work. I've used them on myself many times. They work, and they also work on the athletes that I coach and I've coached. Runners that are running between 4 hours for the marathon and 2 hours 20 for the marathon. But the tendency, and if we look at what people often get wrong with those 2 runs, you can just not do them and arrive to the start line fresh. You've already built that specific fitness. Now you're gonna get fresh whilst keeping the muscles, keeping the body familiar with that race pace. The tendency is to want to go quicker in those runs, to prove to yourself that just for short distances, whether it's 6 miles, 10 kilometers, 10 miles, that you're capable of more. You're capable of running faster. When in actual fact, at that stage, it's crucial not to surge or not to try to go quicker, to stay disciplined and to execute those 2 runs at the right pace, because that's the pace that you've trained for the last 3-6 months. Another smaller mistake is that's the perfect opportunity to make any final checks on your kit. So don't unbox a new pair of shoes on race morning. Do it for these types of runs. The shorts that you're gonna wear, try them out on this run. Is there any hot spots? Is there any areas that you need to Vaseline? Can you imagine doing all that training and then all of a sudden a label in the wrong place irritates you to a point where it's changing the way that you run, which leads to cramp? I've seen that happen quite a lot. And then the final point is respect the recovery. These are workouts, these are sessions. They're not tests. It's not you proving fitness to yourself. It's preserving that fitness that you've already built. We want to get to the start line healthy, fresh, confident, and hungry to race. And if you're a bit farther out from your marathon, 5 to 8 weeks, then I highly recommend this run to test your marathon pace.